Welcome, Rich Hoops Pod fan. Game 3 of the NBA Finals just wrapped up. And be honest with you, out of the game so far, this one was the do. That don't mean it wasn't fun things about it, or it's not things to talk about, but the first two felt like bangers. And this one, not so much. The Denver Nuggets are pretty much in control from the very beginning, and they rear with it. They did not allow a fourth quarter comeback, which is something that the Miami Heat have done through the first two games. And one of them, the comeback came a little bit late, so the Denver Nuggets are able to hold on. And then the game 2, they had a lot of time, and they made that thing happen. And in the game 3, they did not take that big run. The only time in this game, you're like, oh, here come the Heat, is when it was garbage time, and it's at Duke and Robinson that comes off the bench, because now he's a garbage-style player. After being one of the best players in the court throughout the first couple of games, and he had a couple of threes, you're like, oh, Eric Spoelstra, like, let's get them started as my kid. And then, Bam takes a kid's headset, mirroring his jump shot over a K. And their exposure is like, you know what? Let's take these starters right back out. The main takeaway from all of this is something that we've been talking about for the last couple of months about the greatness of Jokic. It's not just the last couple of months, the last couple of years, because this has spanned back for 3 to 4 years. At this point, how great he is. And a few weeks ago, a month or so ago, I was saying like, hey, if Giannis is not the best player in the world anymore, shout out to Giannis, then it's got to be Jokic. And he showcased why that is again today. There's a lot of conversation about the idea of making Jokic a scorer. Is that the game plan? And Eric Spoelstra said all of that down, said to an untrained, I might seem like that. And I was like, hey, Spoelstra, you ain't got a point, brother. I would like that. You know what I'm saying? I wasn't in a field room with you 20 years ago. So yes, technically I am an untrained eye. But that felt like that was a game plan. In game 2, they took Jamal Murray out of the game and said, let Jokic do Jokic. At least that's what it felt like. No, that's Spoelstra, but that's what it felt like. And in this one, you couldn't do that. Both of those boys went crazy. I just saw a stat at the end when they were interviewing Nikola Jokic that Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic became the only two teammates in NBA history to have 30-point triple-doubles in the NBA Finals. Insanity. And they pulled this game away. And they were in control for most of it without Michael Porter doing anything. The second straight do game for Emch, and then also skipped to do anything. But the boy that stepped up was that Christian Brown fella. Christian Brown, don't call him Brown, really came in and gave ridiculous amendments to the second quarter, to the third quarter, and their fourth quarter. He was elite today and led in his role. Obviously, there were two people on the court. They're elite today. That was Jokic and Jamal Murray. But elite in his role, when you see some of the higher-end role players on your team not shooting well, when Michael Porter Jr. be a 1 for 7, 0 for 2 from 3, and Cheap being 1 for 4, 0 for 3 from 3, they needed some type of production. And you got that from Christian Brown. And in the end of game 2, when Kep was asked about it, actually, I got the quote in front of me. He said, I don't think they did anything to take anything away. I don't think it really mattered. It was all about our energy and effort we put out. And that was the sentiment from Michael Malone. After game 1, he came to the podium, said, hey, we might have won this game, but I know you're going to laugh at me. But I think we played a bad game. At the end of game 2, he talked about how much the effort mattered. We're like, hey, it's the NBA Finals. This is what we've been playing for. For you to have an effort in game 2 is ridiculous. And in this game, it felt like the effort and the communication was better. And when I watched it, there was only one moment where there was a big miscommunication. Again, there's probably way more, but one ass stands on top of mine where ended up in a Gabe Vincent open 3. Or it might have been Caleb Martin. One of them got an open 3. And Jamal Murray looked at Coach Mike Malone and put his hands up and said, my fault. Like that was the only time I can vividly remember them having these miscommunications. And in the last game, it felt like they were so abundant. And this is a game, like this is why they're the favorite to win this series. You have the best player on the court, who at this point in time, this is gonna sound crazy, but it feels like there's not a such thing as a Nikola Jokic bad game. Show me a Nikola Jokic bad game, this playoff run. You know what? I'm not gonna do some digging myself, because off top of mind, I can't think of a Nikola Jokic bad game. Like we temper our expectations to certain players. Last game, 4 turnovers, 5 assists. Unlike him, but brother, yeah, 40 points. You know what I'm saying? So let me look at the game log real quick. The worst game in the playoffs for him so far. Is this game versus the Wolves? Or they won by 29 points? So it didn't matter. But he shot 50 for the field. He had 13 points and 14 rebounds, 6 assists, and he fouled out. That was the worst game in the playoffs so far for him. And the worst thing is him fouling out. Everything else looks pretty fine to me. He has become one of those players. That bad games don't exist. So if you have that and you just have some type of production from anybody else. And today, Jamal Murray was elite. just don't know how you beat that in a 7-game series. Now, if there's anybody that can do it, is to Miami Heat. They got to recuperate because as of right now, a lot of their success boils on the back of that three-point shooting. 1 of 4 for Max Struss, some 3. 1 of 7 overall. 2 of 10 overall for Gabe Vincent. 1 for 6 from 3. And then Jimmy attempted 4 threes. He made 1. They shot as a team, 31. And this is saying something. They won the three-point battle today. Because I mentioned how Michael Porter Jr., Keith, these guys did not hit their shots. The Nuggets haven't had an offensive juggernaut game just yet, and they're just due. Now, a lot of credit of that goes to the Miami Heat because their defense is so stout, but they're just due to have a game where Michael Porter Jr. hit 4 threes and Cheap hit 4 threes. And then what do you do at that point? Because the moments that the Miami Heat have to win is when we have these grinded out games where it's a couple possessions. Their statistic about how good the Miami Heat have been this season when it comes to 5-point swing in the fourth quarter. You know what I'm saying? But if it's anything outside of that, like the different Nuggets have that advantage, and they haven't shot the ball well at all throughout this series. They haven't shot, literally shooting, because they got everything they wanted in the paint today. Everything that they wanted was in the paint today. And that's partially Nikola Jokic showing out for 32, but I think at halftime, at the end of the first quarter, they're like 30 points and 22 of those are in the paint. Like that's how much they were really pounded in inside. And it's like, if the shot's not falling, you got to score. And I appreciate that was the idea that they had because there are a lot of teams out in the NBA. That was like, the shots are not falling. We're just going to keep shooting instead of taking what's potentially available, which is getting to the basket. I don't know. Hopefully this isn't the case. But at the last couple of minutes of this game, Kyle Lowry got a blimp in and they had the camera on him. And he didn't look great. I'm hoping that he didn't hurt himself or anything like that because that would just suck the life out of the series. Even more because he's been pretty good for them so far. And they can't afford to lose another player. We still trying to figure out if Tyler Herro is going to play all this series, you cannot lose another guy. I was surprised not to see more Duncan Robinson. I know when he got into the game, he picked up 2 early fouls in his potions. Like, you know what, we was just wrong with the other dudes, but he was such a big part in the game to win. So to see him basically play 10 minutes leading up to garbage time was surprising me, especially when he gets to garbage time. He had 2 threes. He's like, maybe he should have played a little bit more. They cut down the Cody's element. It's quite a bit. Him only playing 6 minutes, which is good. Bam has been such a weird person throughout this series, where Game 1, 25 points on 26 shots or so. Game 2, I thought he was amazing. I don't know exactly what his stats were. I'm not even thinking about how many points he put up. I thought in Game 2, he was the best player for the Miami. He in the game outside Gabe Vincent. In Game 3, he did a lot of the stuff, a lot of similar attempts that he was in Game 1 and Game 2, but because he's such a pull-up, mid-range heavy dude, if those shots are not going, it's like, man, now you didn't get to the free throw line and shot 10 free throws, which I appreciate, but there are a couple times in this game where he shot an early mid-range jump shot. And I'm like, man, I feel like you could have got something better because at this point in this series, the Denver Nuggets are allowing him to do that. So we know that shot is going to be there. With 5 seconds on the clock, let's work our action a little bit more to try to get a different shot because we know we can rely on that shot if we need to. And today was not one of those days where he had his shots. Overall, man, not a ton of swings in this one. Not a ton of swings in this one, which, as a neutral fan, all they love. I love when it's like, oh, here come the Miami Heat on the run. And how would the different Nuggets retaliate or vice versa? It wasn't a ton of that today. And I guess that's fine. Friday night, we get another game in Miami. Let's see if the Miami Heat, do their thing. I don't think you want to be down 3-1 to the Denver Nuggets, so I will look at Game 4 as a must-win. Curious to see what Eric Spoelstra decides to do a little bit differently this time around. Or word keep words. Truth, we're not worried. They're not even doing nothing. We're just not hitting our shots, and we're not putting together the energy and the effort. That's true. Series might be over soon,